The blistering sun beat down on the lone figure trudging along the dusty trail, her worn boots leaving faint imprints in the Nevada dirt. Bonnie Palmer clutched her small leather satchel against her chest, the meager possessions within representing everything she owned in this world. Her once fine blue dress was now coated with a layer of trail dust, and her chestnut hair had escaped its pins to frame her weary face. With each step toward Carson City, Bonnie fought back tears, determined not to surrender to despair despite losing everything. It was 1873, and Bonnie had traveled over 1,000 miles to escape the ghosts of her past. At 26, she had already weathered more tragedy than most faced in a lifetime. The telegram crumpled in her pocket had been her last hope, a teaching position at Carson City's schoolhouse. But upon arrival, she had discovered the position filled 2 days prior, leaving her stranded with barely enough coins to afford a single night's lodging. Bonnie paused at the crest of a hill, gazing down at Carson City sprawling below. The Nevada territorial capital was larger than she'd expected, with proper buildings lining the main street and the silver mining operations visible in the distance. The setting sun cast long shadows across the landscape, reminding her that night would soon fall. She needed shelter, and quickly. She straightened her spine and smoothed her travel-worn skirts. Pride was a luxury she could ill afford, but dignity remained her constant companion. With renewed determination, Bonnie continued her descent into Carson City, hoping someone might take pity on a woman alone. The saloon doors swung open as Bonnie passed, spilling raucous laughter and piano music into the street. A pair of miners stumbled out, their eyes landing on her with uncomfortable intensity. She quickened her pace, clutching her satchel tighter. Miss, are you lost?" A kindly voice called out from the doorway of a general store. Bonnie turned to find an older woman with silver-streaked hair watching her with concern. "I've only just arrived," Bonnie explained. "I was to take the teaching position, but it seems I'm too late." The woman clucked her tongue sympathetically. "Oh dear, that's unfortunate. I'm Martha Wilson. My husband and I run this store." "Bonnie Palmer," she replied with a small curtsy. "I don't suppose you know of any work available for a woman of some education." Martha considered this, her eyes sweeping over Bonnie's exhausted frame. The Silver Eagle Hotel might need help with laundry, but she hesitated. It's not the sort of place a respectable young woman would normally seek employment. Bonnie's heart sank. "I see." "Although," Martha continued, her expression brightening, "I did hear that Yates Newcomb out at Pinecrest Ranch lost his housekeeper last month. Has 3 young ones to look after on his own since his wife passed. Might be worth asking." "A ranch?" Bonnie asked, uncertain. She had grown up in Boston, far removed from the realities of ranch life. 4 miles west of town. Good man, Yates. Keeps to himself mostly since Sarah died, but honest as the day is long. Works himself half to death trying to manage that ranch and those children. Bonnie hesitated. The prospect of venturing further into unknown territory unnerved her, but her options were rapidly dwindling with the fading daylight. "Is there perhaps someone headed that way who could direct me?" Martha shook her head. "Not this late, I'm afraid. Yates usually comes to town on Saturdays for supplies, but that's still 2 days away." The store door opened, and a gray-haired man emerged. "Everything all right, Martha? Samuel, this is Miss Palmer. She came for the teaching position, but it's been filled." Samuel Wilson nodded sympathetically. "That's a shame. Where are you staying, Miss Palmer?" Bonnie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I haven't secured lodgings yet, sir." The couple exchanged glances. "We have a small room above the store," Martha offered. "Nothing fancy, but you're welcome to it for the night." Relief washed over Bonnie. "I couldn't impose nonsense," Samuel interrupted kindly. Can't have a young lady with nowhere to go at nightfall. It isn't safe." "Thank you," Bonnie whispered, blinking back tears of gratitude. "I can pay something. We can discuss that tomorrow," Martha said firmly. "For now, let's get you settled." The small room was sparsely furnished but clean, with a narrow bed and a washstand by the window. After washing away the dust of travel and enjoying a simple meal of stew and bread with the Wilsons, Bonnie found herself sitting at their kitchen table, sharing her story. "My parents died of influenza 2 winters ago," she explained, her fingers tracing the worn edge of her teacup. "I worked as a governess in Boston until the family relocated to Europe. With no prospects remaining, I answered the advertisement for a teacher here." Martha reached across the table to pat her hand. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, dear. Perhaps He has something better in store for you here." "Perhaps," Bonnie agreed, though she struggled to imagine what that might be. "You mentioned Mr. Newcomb needs household help, desperately," Samuel confirmed. "Man can break a wild horse but can't keep up with laundry to save his life. His eldest, Michael, is 12 now. Then there's Emily, she's 9, and little Thomas just turned 5. Good children, but they need a woman's guidance. And their mother, you mentioned she passed away," Martha's expression softened. "Sarah died of childbed fever 3 years ago. The baby didn't survive either. Yates took it hard. Threw himself into the ranch work, but the house has suffered, and so have those children in some ways." Bonnie nodded, understanding all too well the void left by a loved one's passing. "If you think he might hire me, I'd be grateful for directions tomorrow." "Better than directions," Samuel said. "I'll take you myself. Need to deliver some fence posts out that way anyhow." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Bonnie donned her second-best dress, a sensible navy blue with minimal embellishments, and pinned her hair neatly. The journey to Pinecrest Ranch in Samuel Wilson's wagon took nearly an hour, with the merchant offering a running commentary on the local landscape and history. "Carson City's growing fast since they made it the territorial capital," he explained. "Silver mining's brought prosperity to some, though ranching's still the backbone for folks around these parts." As they crested a hill, Samuel pointed ahead. "There it is, Pinecrest Ranch." Bonnie felt her breath catch at the sight spread before her. A large 2-story house stood proudly amidst a cluster of outbuildings, with corrals visible to one side and vast fenced pastures stretching beyond. The setting was magnificent, with the Sierra Nevada mountains providing a dramatic backdrop against the clear blue sky. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Samuel nodded. Yates's father built that house, planning for generations. The Newcombs were among the first settlers in this valley. Built something to last, they did. As they approached, Bonnie could see that, despite its grand design, the house showed signs of neglect. Peeling paint and an overgrown garden hinted at the absence of a woman's touch. A small boy was sitting on the front steps, whittling a stick with intense concentration, while a girl with long braids hung laundry on a line nearby. The wagon rattled to a stop, and the children looked up with curious expressions. "Morning, Miss Emily, young Thomas," Samuel called cheerfully. The girl Emily hurried over, her face breaking into a smile. "Mr. Wilson, did you bring candy?" Samuel laughed. "Not today, but I've brought something better, a visitor for your pa. This is Miss Palmer." Emily regarded Bonnie with open curiosity, her blue eyes assessing. "Are you going to be our new housekeeper? The last one said we were wilder than coyote pups and left after 2 weeks." Bonnie couldn't help but smile at the child's directness. "I don't know yet. I'd like to speak with your father about that possibility." "He's in the north pasture with Michael," Emily informed them. "They're fixing fences again. The cattle keep breaking through." "I'll fetch him," Samuel offered, climbing down from the wagon. "Miss Palmer, Why don't you wait here with the children? After Samuel departed, Bonnie found herself the subject of intense scrutiny from both children. Can you cook? Thomas asked, abandoning his whittling to approach her. His small face was smudged with dirt, and his clothes were wrinkled and mismatched. I can, Bonnie replied, fighting the urge to wet her handkerchief and clean his face. Do you have a favorite food? Apple pie, he answered immediately. Mama used to make it, but we haven't had it in forever. Emily shot her brother a warning look. Thomas, you don't even remember Mama's apple pie. You were too little. The boy's face fell. Do to remember. Bonnie's heart ached for these children who had lost their mother so young. I make a decent apple pie, she offered gently. My mother taught me her special recipe. Emily regarded her skeptically. Can you read stories too? The last lady couldn't read very good. I was to be a school teacher, Bonnie explained. So yes, I can read quite well. This seemed to impress Emily, who nodded solemnly. Pa doesn't have time for stories anymore. He's always working. Before Bonnie could respond, she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. 2 riders appeared, a man and a boy, both astride magnificent chestnut horses. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. Yates Newcomb removed his hat as he approached, revealing dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. His eyes, a striking shade of green, assessed Bonnie with unconcealed surprise. Mr. Newcomb, Samuel greeted, having ridden back with him. This is Miss Bonnie Palmer. She arrived in Carson City yesterday, expecting to take the teaching position, but found it filled. I mentioned you might be in need of household help. Yates nodded politely, though wariness remained in his expression. Miss Palmer, Mr. Newcomb, Bonnie replied, summoning her courage. I understand you have need of a housekeeper. I'm capable and willing to work hard. He studied her for a long moment. No disrespect intended, madam, but you don't look like a housekeeper. Bonnie lifted her chin. I'm whatever circumstances require me to be, sir. I've worked as a governess and was prepared to be a teacher. I can cook, clean, mend, and most importantly, I'm good with children. The boy who had arrived with Yates Michael, she presumed, snorted softly. The last lady said that too, until Thomas put a snake in her bed. Michael, Yates warned, though Bonnie detected the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't poisonous, Thomas piped up defensively. Bonnie found herself smiling despite her nervousness. Well, I grew up with 4 brothers, so I'm not easily frightened by creatures. Though I would appreciate advance notice of any reptilian roommates in the future. This earned her a surprised look from Yates and a giggle from Thomas. Yates rubbed the back of his neck, clearly conflicted. Miss Palmer, I appreciate your interest, but this is a working ranch. The hours are long, the work is hard, and these children, he cast a pointed look at his offspring, can be a handful. I understand, Mr. Newcomb, but I need work, and your children need someone to look after them while you manage your ranch. Perhaps we could arrange a trial period. Samuel, who had been watching this exchange with interest, interjected, Yates, the girl needs a position and you need help. Seems the good Lord has provided a solution for you both. After a moment's consideration, Yates nodded reluctantly. 2 weeks, he decided. We'll try for 2 weeks and then reassess. Room and board plus $2 a week. $3, Bonnie countered, surprising herself with her boldness. Yates's eyebrows rose, but a flicker of respect crossed his features. $2.50, and that's my final offer. Done, Bonnie agreed, extending her hand before she could lose her nerve. Yates hesitated briefly before clasping it in his much larger one. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but not crushing. Welcome to Pinecrest Ranch, Miss Palmer. Samuel beamed. Excellent. I'll bring Miss Palmer's belongings from the wagon." "I don't have much," Bonnie admitted. "Just her single satchel of personal items and a trunk containing her books, a few garments and mementos from her former life." "Emily, show Miss Palmer to the housekeeper's room," Yates instructed. "Michael, help Mr. Wilson with her things." As Samuel and Michael retrieved her meager possessions, Emily tugged at Bonnie's sleeve. "This way," she said, leading her toward the house. "Your room is next to the kitchen. It's small, but it has a real bed and a window that looks at the mountains." Bonnie followed the girl into the house, immediately noting the state of disarray within. The main living area contained quality furniture covered in a fine layer of dust. Books and toys were scattered about, and muddy boot prints tracked across what had once been a beautiful rug. The kitchen beyond showed signs of masculine neglect: unwashed dishes piled in the sink, a pot with something unidentifiable crusted inside, and a general air of chaos. "Pa tries," Emily explained, seeing Bonnie's expression. "But he's not very good at household things." "Michael helps some, but he's busy with ranch work too." "And who looks after Thomas during the day?" Emily shrugged. "Me, mostly. Or he follows Pa and Michael around until they send him back to the house." Bonnie's heart ached at this revelation. A 9-year-old girl shouldering such responsibility, and a 5-year-old boy essentially left to his own devices. No wonder Yates had agreed to hire her, despite his obvious reservations. The housekeeper's room was indeed small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a wash basin. The window, as Emily had promised, offered a stunning view of the mountains. "It's lovely," Bonnie said sincerely. "Thank you, Emily." The girl lingered in the doorway. "Will you start work today?" "I believe I will," Bonnie replied, already mentally cataloging the most urgent tasks. "Perhaps you could show me where cleaning supplies are kept." Emily's face brightened. "Yes, and I can help. I'm good at dusting." Michael appeared with her trunk, setting it carefully beside the bed. "Pa says to tell you dinner is at 6, but there's not much in the larder. He usually just fries whatever's at hand." "Then perhaps my first task should be to assess what provisions we have and make a proper meal," Bonnie suggested. After unpacking her few belongings, Bonnie rolled up her sleeves and set to work. The kitchen became her first battleground, with Emily proving to be an eager assistant. Together they washed mountains of dishes, scoured pots, and swept floors. They discovered adequate stores of staples: flour, beans, coffee, and salt pork, though the vegetable bin held only a few wizened potatoes and onions. "Your father keeps a garden?" Bonnie asked. Emily shook her head. "Mama did, but it's all weeds now. Pa says he doesn't have time for such things." By late afternoon, the kitchen gleamed, and a pot of bean soup simmered on the stove, releasing appetizing aromas through the house. Bonnie had discovered a sack of cornmeal and was mixing batter for cornbread when Yates entered, stopping short at the transformation. "You've been busy," he observed, his eyes taking in the clean surfaces and organized shelves. "There was much to be done," Bonnie replied simply. "Dinner will be ready at 6, as Michael mentioned." Yates nodded, seeming unsure how to respond to this efficiency. "Thank you, Miss Palmer." He turned to go, then hesitated. "The children, they haven't been underfoot. Emily has been an excellent helper. Thomas spent some time with us but grew restless and went outside to play." A flicker of concern crossed Yates's face. "Thomas is outside, alone." Bonnie felt a twinge of alarm. "Is that not allowed?" "I assumed since the yard is fenced he wanders," Yates interrupted, already striding toward the door. "Has a knack for finding trouble." Bonnie hastily wiped her hands and followed him onto the porch. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Thomas," Yates called, his deep voice carrying across the yard. No response came. "I'll check the barn," Michael volunteered, emerging from around the side of the house. "I'll look behind the house," Emily added. Yates's jaw tightened. "Miss Palmer, please stay here in case he returns. I'll check the corrals." Bonnie nodded, feeling guilty for her oversight. She watched as the family dispersed in different directions, calling Thomas's name with increasing urgency. Minutes ticked by with no sign of the boy, and Bonnie found herself pacing the porch anxiously. Then she remembered something Thomas had said earlier, his fondness for apple pie. On impulse, she hurried to the cellar entrance she had discovered during her kitchen exploration. The heavy wooden doors creaked as she pulled them open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. "Thomas," she called softly, "are you down there?" A shuffling sound confirmed her suspicion. Carefully navigating the steps, Bonnie allowed her eyes to adjust to the dim light filtering through the open doors. She found Thomas sitting on the dirt floor, surrounded by several apples in various states of consumption. "I was hungry," he explained, his voice small. "And I remembered Pa keeps apples down here in winter." "Your father and siblings are quite worried about you," Bonnie said gently. "We should let them know you're safe." Thomas looked down, chastened. "Am I in trouble? That's for your father to decide. But in the future, please tell someone where you're going." She helped him gather the remaining apples and guided him back up the stairs. Yates was returning from the corrals, his expression tense with worry when they emerged. "Thomas." Relief flooded his face, quickly replaced by stern disapproval. "Where were you, son?" "The cellar," Bonnie answered for him. "Hunting for apples." Yates exhaled slowly. "We've talked about wandering off, Thomas." "I'm sorry, Pa," the boy mumbled, his bottom lip trembling. Yates knelt to his son's level, his large hands resting on the small shoulders. "You scared us, son. What's the rule about going places alone?" "Always tell someone," Thomas recited. "That's right." Yates glanced up at Bonnie. "Thank you for finding him." "It was just a lucky guess," she admitted. "He mentioned apple pie earlier, so when I couldn't find him in the obvious places." Yates stood, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "You've had quite a first day, Miss Palmer." "It's been informative," she replied with a small smile. That evening, the Newcomb family and their new housekeeper gathered around the kitchen table for the first proper meal they'd shared in months. The bean soup and corn bread weren't fancy fare, but they were hot, hearty, and prepared with care. "This is real good, Miss Palmer," Michael said between enthusiastic spoonfuls. "Thank you, Michael. Tomorrow I'll plan something more substantial once I have a better idea of what's needed." "We butchered a steer last week," Yates mentioned. "There's beef in the smokehouse." Emily carefully broke her corn bread into small pieces. "Miss Palmer can read stories, Pa. She was going to be a teacher." Yates's eyes met Bonnie's across the table. "Is that so?" "I was," she confirmed. "I came to Carson City for the teaching position, but it had already been filled." "Their loss is our gain, it seems," he said quietly, surprising her with the almost compliment. Later, after the children had been sent to wash up for bed, Yates lingered in the kitchen as Bonnie wiped down the table. "The children seem taken with you," he observed. "They're wonderful children," she replied honestly, though they clearly missed their mother's influence. A shadow crossed his face. "Sarah was the heart of this home since she's been gone." He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "Well, you've seen the state of things." "Grief takes time, Mr. Newcomb. No one expects you to manage everything perfectly. The children deserve better than what I've provided these past 3 years," he said gruffly. "You've kept them fed, clothed, and loved," Bonnie countered. "That's no small achievement for a man managing a ranch alone." He studied her for a long moment. "You're different from the other housekeepers we've had." "In what way?" "You see my children, not just as tasks to be managed, but as people." The simple observation touched her deeply. They make it easy. They're rather remarkable." A hint of pride softened his weathered features. "They are at that." He cleared his throat. "Well, I should let you rest. First light comes early on a ranch. Good night, Mr. Newcomb." "Good night, Miss Palmer." He hesitated at the door. "And thank you. The house already feels different." After he left, Bonnie sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. This wasn't the life she had planned when boarding the train east, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was where she needed to be. The following days established a rhythm to life at Pinecrest Ranch. Bonnie rose before dawn to prepare breakfast and pack lunches for Yates and Michael, who spent most daylight hours working the ranch. Emily proved an eager pupil in household matters, while Thomas required more creative management. Bonnie discovered that involving him in tasks, letting him fetch eggs from the henhouse or help knead bread dough, kept him engaged and out of mischief. By the end of her first week, the transformation of the Newcomb household was remarkable. Floors gleamed, windows sparkled, and meals appeared on the table with reliable regularity. Yates said little about these improvements, but Bonnie noticed him looking around with something like wonder when he thought no one was watching. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Bonnie was mending a tear in one of Michael's shirts when Yates entered the kitchen. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her, watching her nimble fingers work. "My children smile more now," he said abruptly. Bonnie glanced up, needle poised mid-stitch. "I'm glad to hear that." Emily's humming again. "She used to do that when Sarah was alive." He rotated the coffee cup between his palms. "And Thomas hasn't run off once since that first day. He's a bright boy who needs direction," Bonnie observed. "I've been giving him small responsibilities. It seems to help." Yates nodded thoughtfully. "You were meant to be a teacher." "I've always loved children," she admitted. Teaching seemed a natural path, especially for a woman with no prospect of marriage. His eyebrows rose slightly. "No prospects? I find that difficult to believe." Heat rose to Bonnie's cheeks. "My circumstances changed after my parents died. The gentleman who had shown interest, well, his family had other plans for him." Something like anger flashed in Yates's eyes. "His loss," he said simply. The conversation shifted to practicality: supplies needed from town, plans for the garden Bonnie hoped to resurrect, the children's education. Yates revealed that, before Sarah's death, they had discussed sending the children to school in Carson City, once they were old enough. "Michael should be in school now," he acknowledged, "but I need him here and the ride to town is too far daily." "Perhaps I could teach them," Bonnie suggested. "At least the basics: reading, writing, arithmetic. You do that, beyond your regular duties." "I would enjoy it," she said honestly. "Perhaps in the evenings or during rainy days when outdoor work is limited." He considered this, then nodded. "I'd pay extra for the teaching." "That's not necessary." "It is," he insisted. "I won't take advantage of your good nature, Miss Palmer." The following Monday marked the beginning of lessons for the Newcomb children. Bonnie cleared the kitchen table after breakfast and set out the few books she had brought with her: a primer, a mathematics text, and a volume of world history. She assessed each child's abilities and was pleased to find that Emily read quite well, while Michael showed an aptitude for mathematics. Thomas, at 5, was just beginning to recognize letters and numbers. Yates returned from the north pasture earlier than usual that first day of lessons. Pausing in the doorway to observe Bonnie guiding Emily through a reading passage, while Michael calculated sums and Thomas practiced writing his letters in a small slate. The scene struck him with unexpected force: the warm kitchen filled with the sound of children learning, the patient way Bonnie corrected and encouraged, the absorbed expressions on his children's faces. It reminded him of something he had nearly forgotten. what it felt like when his home was truly a home. The days lengthened as spring advanced. Bonnie, with Emily's help, cleared the overgrown kitchen garden and planted vegetables, potatoes, carrots, beans, and tomatoes. She discovered a few struggling apple trees behind the barn and pruned them carefully, hoping they might bear fruit by autumn. One Saturday, Yates announced they would all travel into Carson City for supplies. It would be Bonnie's first return to town since her arrival at Pinecrest Ranch nearly a month earlier. The children were excited, chattering about candy and new books as Yates hitched the horses to the wagon. Bonnie wore her best dress for the occasion, a forest green garment with minimal trim that nonetheless flattered her slender figure. She had pinned her hair more carefully than usual, aware that this would be her first public appearance as part of the Newcomb household. "You look pretty, Miss Palmer," Emily declared as they prepared to depart. "Thank you, Emily. So do you." Bonnie had spent the previous evening pressing the girl's yellow dress and retying the ribbons on her straw hat. Even Yates seemed to have made an effort, wearing a clean shirt and his least worn hat. He helped Bonnie into the wagon with a gentle hand at her elbow, the brief contact sending an unexpected warmth through her. The journey to Carson City was filled with Thomas's endless questions about everything they passed, and Michael's occasional corrections of his younger brother's observations. Bonnie found herself enjoying the family outing, almost forgetting that she was an employee rather than a true member of this small family. Carson City was bustling with Saturday business when they arrived. Yates helped them all down from the wagon, his hand lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary at Bonnie's waist. "We'll split up to save time," he decided. "Michael, you come with me to the feed store and blacksmith. Miss Palmer, would you mind taking Emily and Thomas to the general store? We can meet at Wilson's in an hour." Bonnie agreed, accepting the list and money he provided. As she guided the children down the boardwalk, she felt oddly conspicuous, aware of curious glances from townsfolk. At Wilson's general store, Martha greeted her with a warm hug. "Bonnie Palmer. Look at you, you're positively glowing. Ranch life must agree with you." Bonnie smiled, embarrassed by the attention. "The Newcombs have been very kind. I'm here to purchase supplies." Martha lowered her voice as Emily and Thomas examined the candy display. "The whole town's talking about the transformation at Pinecrest Ranch. Samuel says Yates seems years younger these days." "Mr. Newcomb works very hard," Bonnie said carefully. "I merely help with the household." Martha's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she helped Bonnie gather the items on her list, adding little extras for the children and refusing additional payment. As they were concluding their business, the store door opened to admit a well-dressed couple. The woman, elegantly attired in the latest fashion, surveyed the establishment with poorly disguised disdain. "Charlotte, Edward," Martha greeted them with professional politeness. "What brings you to our humble shop today?" "We're just passing through," the woman replied. Edward needed to speak with the bank manager about some investments. Her gaze fell on Bonnie and the children, her eyebrows rising slightly. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Charlotte Blackburn. My husband is Carson City's newest councilman." "Bonnie Palmer," she replied with a polite nod. "I'm the housekeeper at Pinecrest Ranch." Charlotte's expression shifted subtly. "Ah, yes, the Newcomb place. How rustic. I heard poor Sarah's passing left those children quite wild." "You must have your hands full." The condescending tone made Bonnie's spine stiffen. "The Newcomb children are wonderfully behaved and a joy to teach." "Teach," Charlotte echoed. "I was under the impression you were a housekeeper." "Miss Palmer was going to be our teacher," Emily piped up, her chin lifting proudly. But instead she teaches us at home and takes care of us." Charlotte's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How versatile. Though one wonders why a woman of education would choose domestic service on a struggling ranch over proper employment. Before Bonnie could formulate a response that wouldn't embarrass the children, the store door opened again, and Yates entered with Michael. "There you are," he said, approaching Bonnie with a rare smile. "Getting everything you need." "Yes, we're nearly finished," Bonnie replied, relieved at his timely arrival. Charlotte Blackburn's attention shifted to Yates, her demeanor warming considerably. "Yates Newcomb. It's been too long since we've seen you in town." Yates's expression cooled. "Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blackburn. We were just becoming acquainted with your housekeeper," Charlotte said, the slight pause before the last word carrying clear implications. Yates's jaw tightened. "Miss Palmer has been a godsend to my family. We're fortunate to have her." Charlotte's smile turned calculating. "Indeed. Well, we must be going. Do remember the town social next month, Yates. It would do your children good to interact with other youngsters their age." Her eyes flicked to Bonnie. "And of course, your housekeeper is welcome to attend as well." After the Blackburns departed, an uncomfortable silence fell. Martha busied herself wrapping their purchases, while Emily looked confused and Thomas, blessedly oblivious to the undercurrents, continued examining the candy jars. "I apologize for Mrs. Blackburn," Yates said quietly to Bonnie. "She has always been difficult." "No need to apologize," Bonnie assured him, though the encounter had left her unsettled. On the journey home, the children's excitement over their town purchases gradually restored the earlier carefree atmosphere. By the time they reached Pinecrest Ranch, the unpleasant interaction was almost forgotten. Almost, but not entirely. That evening, after the children were asleep, Yates found Bonnie on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, making room on the bench. "I want to apologize again for today," he began. Charlotte Blackburn implied things that were inappropriate. "It's not your fault, Mr. Newcomb." "Yates," he corrected gently. "After all this time, I think you could call me Yates." She smiled faintly. "Yates, then." "Charlotte's husband was one of Sarah's suitors before we married," he explained. "She's never quite forgiven either of us for that." "I see." "What she implied about your position here," he broke off, clearly uncomfortable. "Your reputation is important, and I wouldn't want it compromised because of your association with my family." Bonnie turned to face him directly. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No." The force of his response surprised them both. More quietly, he added, "No, that's the last thing I want. But I need to ensure you understand that some people might misinterpret your presence here." "Because I'm an unmarried woman living in a widower's home," he nodded, his expression troubled. "Small communities can be judgmental." "I've never much cared for others' judgments," Bonnie said firmly. "I'm here to care for your children and your home. Anyone who sees something improper in that arrangement reveals more about themselves than about us." Relief softened his features. "You're a remarkable woman, Bonnie Palmer." The use of her first name sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Thank you, Yates." They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, the night sounds of the ranch creating a peaceful backdrop. "The children adore you," he said finally. "I haven't seen them this happy in years." "They're wonderful children. They make it easy to care for them." "Not according to the previous housekeepers," he said with a soft laugh. Bonnie smiled. "Perhaps those women simply didn't understand that children need both boundaries and freedom. Structure and play, discipline and love. You understand, I try to." Yates shifted slightly, his shoulder now almost touching hers. "Your 2 weeks are long past. I suppose we should discuss your continued employment." "Are you satisfied with my work?" she asked, suddenly nervous. "More than satisfied," he assured her. "I'd like you to stay on permanently if you're willing. Same terms with the additional compensation for teaching." "I am willing," Bonnie replied. "I've grown, quite attached to Pinecrest Ranch and its inhabitants." In the silvery moonlight she could see Yates's eyes soften. For a breathless moment she thought he might say something more, perhaps even reach for her hand. Instead he stood abruptly. "It's late. You should rest." Bonnie rose as well, oddly disappointed. "Yes, of course. Good night, Yates." "Good night, Bonnie." As spring gave way to summer, life at Pinecrest Ranch settled into a comfortable routine. The kitchen garden flourished under Bonnie's care, providing fresh vegetables for their meals. The house, once neglected, now ran with quiet efficiency. Most importantly, the children thrived, Michael showing more confidence, Emily blossoming with feminine guidance, and Thomas gradually becoming less wild in his exploits. Yates, too, seemed transformed. The perpetual furrow between his brows had softened, and occasionally Bonnie would catch him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. Yet he maintained a careful distance, never crossing the invisible line between employer and employee. One sweltering July afternoon, Bonnie was teaching the children in the relative coolness of the kitchen when Yates burst in, his expression urgent. "Lightning strike started a fire in the east pasture," he announced. "Michael, I need you. The rest of you stay here." "I can help too," Bonnie offered immediately. Yates hesitated, then nodded. "We need every hand. Emily, you're in charge of Thomas. Stay in the house, keep doors and windows closed." The fire, driven by strong winds, was spreading rapidly through the dry grass when they reached it. Neighboring ranchers had already arrived to help, forming a line to beat back the flames with wet blankets and shovels. For hours, they fought the fire under the merciless sun. Bonnie's arms ached from swinging a dampened feed sack, her face streaked with soot and sweat. She worked alongside Yates, acutely aware of his powerful presence and the occasional protective glance he cast her way. By sunset, they had contained the blaze, though several acres of grazing land were destroyed and one outbuilding lost. Exhausted, the firefighters gathered near the ranch house, where Emily had defied instructions enough to bring out water and what food she could manage. "You should rest," Yates told Bonnie, his voice hoarse from smoke. "You've done more than enough." She shook her head stubbornly. "These men need food and water. I'll rest when they're taken care of." With Emily's help, Bonnie prepared a simple meal for the firefighters: beans, cornbread, and coffee. As she served them, she overheard snippets of conversation about the fire's cause and the damage assessment. "Could have been worse," one rancher said. "If we hadn't gotten it under control, might have taken your whole East Range." "Yates wouldn't have controlled it without help," Yates acknowledged. "I'm grateful to all of you." "Your lady there worked as hard as any man," another commented, nodding toward Bonnie. "Don't often see that kind of grit in a woman." Yates's eyes sought Bonnie across the room. "Miss Palmer is exceptional." The way he said it, with quiet pride and something deeper, caused the conversations around the table to momentarily pause. Several knowing looks exchanged between the ranchers. After the neighbors departed and the children were finally in bed, Bonnie found herself alone with Yates on the porch once more. Despite her exhaustion, she felt oddly exhilarated, the day's danger and shared purpose having shifted something fundamental between them. "You were amazing today," Yates said quietly. "Most women would have stayed with the children." "I'm not most women," she replied. "No," he agreed, his voice low. "You most certainly are not." In the dim light, she could see a smudge of soot still on his cheekbone. Without thinking, she reached up to brush it away. Yates caught her hand before she could withdraw it, his calloused fingers wrapping gently around hers. "Bonnie," he said, her name almost a caress on his lips. "I've tried to keep a proper distance. To remember that you're here as my employee, not as—" "Not as what?" she whispered when he didn't continue. His green eyes searched hers. "When Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never expected to feel this way again." Bonnie's heart hammered in her chest. "Feel what way?" Instead of answering, Yates slowly lowered his head, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. His free hand came up to cradle her face as the kiss deepened, expressing all the words they hadn't yet spoken. When they finally broke apart, Bonnie was trembling slightly, overwhelmed by the emotions coursing through her. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Yates admitted, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "Why didn't you? I didn't want you to think I'd hired you with dishonorable intentions. And I wasn't sure if you could ever see me as more than your employer." Bonnie smiled. "I think I stopped seeing you as merely my employer quite some time ago." "What do you see me as?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his expression. "As a good man, a devoted father, someone I've grown to care for very deeply." Yates pulled her gently into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "I never thought I'd find someone like you, Bonnie Palmer, someone who could bring light back into this home, into my life. I never thought I'd find a place where I belonged so completely," she whispered against his shirt. They stood together in the warm summer night, the ranch quiet around them, both aware that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The following weeks brought a subtle shift in the dynamics at Pinecrest Ranch. Though Bonnie continued her duties as housekeeper and teacher, there was a new warmth in her interactions with Yates, shared glances across the dinner table, fingers brushing when passing dishes, quiet conversations that stretched long into the evening after the children were asleep. The children, perceptive as always, noticed the change. One evening, as Bonnie read them a bedtime story, Thomas interrupted with his typical directness. "You love Pa?" he asked, his small face serious. Bonnie nearly dropped the book. "Thomas, that's a very personal question. But do you?" Emily pressed, equally curious. "Because he looks at you the way he used to look at Mama." Michael, who had been pretending not to listen from his bed across the room, abandoned the pretense. "If you did love him, would you stay forever?" Faced with 3 pairs of expectant eyes, Bonnie chose honesty. "I care very deeply for your father and for all of you, but such matters are complicated for adults." "Why?" Thomas demanded. "If you love somebody, you should tell them. That's what Pa says." "Your father is very wise," Bonnie acknowledged, "but there are proper times and ways for such discussions." Later, she related the conversation to Yates as they sat on the porch, their new evening ritual. He laughed softly. "Leave it to Thomas to get straight to the heart of the matter." "They're concerned about whether I'll stay," Bonnie explained. "They've already lost their mother. They don't want to lose me too." Yates's expression grew serious. "And will you stay?" "As long as I'm needed and wanted," she replied carefully. "And if you were wanted not just as a housekeeper or teacher, but as something more permanent," Bonnie's breath caught. "What are you asking, Yates?" He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking anything, not yet, but I want you to know that I'm thinking about it, about us. About a future where you're not my employee but my wife." The word hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. "The children need a mother," he continued. "And I need a partner, someone to share this life with, but I won't rush you, Bonnie. I know this isn't what you came to Nevada seeking. Sometimes we find what we need rather than what we thought we wanted," she replied softly. August brought the annual Carson City Harvest Festival, an event the children had been anticipating for weeks. Yates purchased new clothes for all of them, proper town outfits that wouldn't shame the Pinecrest name. For Bonnie, he shyly presented a package containing a beautiful blue dress with delicate lace trim. "You shouldn't have," she protested, though she couldn't hide her pleasure at the thoughtful gift. "I wanted to," he said simply. "You deserve beautiful things." The festival was a grand affair, with the town square transformed by colorful bunting and stalls selling everything from handcrafts to baked goods. There were games for the children, dancing for the adults, and a community picnic that brought together residents from miles around. As they arrived, Bonnie was conscious of curious glances. Her position at Pinecrest Ranch was known to all, and her new dress and place at Yates's side would certainly fuel gossip. Yet she found she didn't care. The joy of being with this family, of seeing the children's excitement and Yates's pride, as he introduced her to friends, overshadowed any concern for idle talk. Charlotte Blackburn, of course, couldn't resist commenting when they encountered her near the lemonade stand. My, Miss Palmer," she said, eyeing Bonnie's dress. "You've certainly integrated yourself into the Newcomb family." "Miss Palmer is very dear to us all," Yates replied before Bonnie could respond, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. Charlotte's eyes narrowed at the gesture. "I'm sure she is. How fortunate for everyone involved." After she departed, Yates sighed. "I apologize for Charlotte. She's not worth another moment of our time," Bonnie interrupted firmly. "This is a day for celebration, not petty feuds." He smiled, visibly relaxing. "You're absolutely right. The highlight of the festival was the evening dance, held in the town hall with a small band providing lively music. The children were initially shy, but soon Emily was skipping around with other girls her age, while Michael and Thomas found a group of boys engaged in some mysterious game involving marbles and tall tales. "Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Palmer?" Yates asked formally, his eyes twinkling. "I would be delighted, Mr. Newcomb," she replied with equal formality. As they joined the other couples on the floor, Bonnie was acutely aware of Yates's hand at her waist, the careful distance he maintained between their bodies despite the intimacy of the dance. They moved together with surprising grace, as though they had been dancing partners for years rather than first-time participants. "You dance very well," she observed. "Sarah insisted I learn before our wedding," he admitted. "Said she wouldn't have a husband who couldn't properly escort her around a dance floor." The mention of his late wife didn't bring the usual shadow to his face, Bonnie noticed. Instead, there was a gentle fondness in his remembrance. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Yates agreed. "She would have liked you, I think. You have the same strength, the same devotion to family." As the evening progressed and the music slowed, Yates drew her slightly closer. "People are watching us," he murmured. "Let them," Bonnie replied. "We have nothing to be ashamed of." His eyes darkened with an emotion that made her pulse quicken. "No, we don't, but I find myself wishing we were alone right now." The frankness of his admission sent warmth spreading through her. "The dance will end soon enough," she reminded him. "And then we'll have a wagon full of tired children for the ride home," he countered with a rueful smile. "Patience is a virtue, Mr. Newcomb. One I'm finding increasingly difficult to practice, Miss Palmer." The ride home was indeed filled with exhausted children, Thomas falling asleep against Bonnie's side while Emily and Michael fought valiantly to keep their eyes open as they recounted their adventures. By the time they reached Pinecrest Ranch, all three were barely conscious, requiring Yates to carry Thomas while Bonnie helped the older two to their beds. After the children were settled, Bonnie found Yates waiting on the porch, a single lantern illuminating his tall figure. "I thought you might be too tired for our usual conversation," she said, joining him. I'd forego sleep entirely for these moments with you, he replied, taking her hand and guiding her to sit beside him. The night was cool, with autumn already making its approach felt in the mountain air. Yates draped a blanket around her shoulders, his arm remaining to pull her close against his side. "Did you enjoy today?" he asked. "Very much. It was wonderful to see the children so happy to be part of a community celebration. As part of our family," he added quietly. "Because that's what you are now, Bonnie, part of this family." She rested her head against his shoulder. "It feels that way. It could be official," he ventured. "If you wanted." Bonnie lifted her head to look at him. "Yates," he shifted to face her directly. "I had planned something more romantic. Perhaps a special dinner or a ride to the lake. But sitting here with you now, after seeing you with my children today, surrounded by the community." He took a deep breath. "I don't want to wait any longer to ask if you'll marry me, Bonnie Palmer." Though she had sensed this moment approaching, the actual words still took her breath away. "Are you certain? I came here as your housekeeper. You came here as the answer to a prayer I hadn't even known to make," he interrupted gently. "You've brought life back to this home, joy back to my children, and love back to a heart I thought was finished with such feelings." Tears welled in Bonnie's eyes. "I never expected to find this when I came to Nevada. A home, a family, love. Is that a yes?" Yates asked, hope evident in his voice. "Yes," Bonnie whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates Newcomb." His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that spoke of long restrained feelings finally given freedom. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "We should set a date," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "Soon, I hope." "The children will be pleased," Bonnie said with a smile, "though I suspect they've been plotting this outcome for some time." Yates laughed. "Michael asked me last week when I was going to make an honest woman of you. I suspect he's been listening to the ranch hands too much." "And what did you tell him?" "That I was gathering my courage to ask the most remarkable woman I've ever known to take a chance on a widowed rancher with 3 unruly children." "Hardly unruly now," Bonnie corrected. "They're wonderful children. I already love them as my own." Yates's expression grew serious. "I know Sarah can never be replaced in their hearts or in mine, but there's room for new love, for a different kind of family." "I would never try to replace her," Bonnie assured him, "but I will do my best to honor her memory by loving her children and her husband with all my heart." They married in early October, when the aspens had turned golden and the mountains wore their first dusting of snow. The ceremony was held at Pinecrest Ranch, with the children standing beside them as Pastor Wilson from Carson City officiated. The ranch house had been transformed with autumn flowers and ribbons, Emily having thrown herself into the decorating with enthusiastic abandon. Bonnie wore a simple cream dress that Martha Wilson had helped her select on a special trip to Carson City. Michael stood tall and proud beside his father, while Emily served as flower girl, scattering red and gold leaves instead of petals. Thomas, designated ring bearer, performed his duty with unusual solemnity, clearly understanding the importance of the occasion. The neighboring ranchers and townsfolk who attended witnessed not just the union of a man and woman, but the formal creation of a family. When Pastor Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas broke the reverent silence with an enthusiastic, "Finally." That sent ripples of laughter through the gathering. The celebration afterward was joyous, with food and music and children racing around the yard as adults shared stories and good wishes. Even Charlotte Blackburn, who had not been specifically invited but arrived with her husband nonetheless, seemed subdued in the face of such obvious happiness. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in spectacular colors, Yates found Bonnie speaking with Martha Wilson. "May I steal my wife away?" he asked, the word wife carrying a note of wonder. Martha smiled knowingly. "Of course. She's all yours now." Yates led Bonnie away from the celebration toward a small rise that offered a view of the entire ranch spread out below them. "Happy, Mrs. Newcomb?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Completely," she replied, leaning back against him. "Though I'm still getting used to the name." "It suits you," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Bonnie Newcomb, mistress of Pinecrest Ranch, mother to 3 wonderful children and wife to the luckiest man in Nevada. She turned in his arms to face him. "We're all lucky, I think, to have found each other, to have this second chance at happiness." "When you walked onto my ranch that day," Yates said softly, "all I saw was another housekeeper who wouldn't last a month. I had no idea you would become the center of our world." "And I thought I was simply accepting a position to survive," Bonnie replied. "I never dreamed I was finding my way home." Their kiss was sealed with the golden light of sunset, witnessed only by the mountains that had stood silent sentinel over countless human stories across the ages. The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to the Newcomb family. The ranch prospered under Yates's management, with Bonnie proving to be not just a helpmeet in the household, but a shrewd partner in business matters as well. Her education and natural intelligence complemented Yates's practical experience, allowing them to expand their operations and weather the inevitable difficult seasons that ranching life presented. The children thrived with Bonnie's influence. Michael, growing rapidly into a young man, developed not only his father's strength and skill with cattle, but a love of reading and mathematics that Bonnie carefully nurtured. Emily blossomed, combining her natural grace with a determined spirit that served her well, as she learned both traditional feminine arts and the practical aspects of ranch life. Thomas, always the most energetic of the 3, channeled his boundless enthusiasm into becoming his father's shadow, absorbing everything from horse training to fence mending with equal fervor. 18 months after their wedding, Bonnie gave birth to a son they named William, a sturdy boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's quiet determination. 2 years later, Rebecca joined the family, completing their circle with her merry laugh and uncanny ability to wrap every ranch hand around her tiny finger. Life wasn't always easy. Drought years tested their resources. Illness occasionally swept through the household, and the normal conflicts of family life required patience and wisdom to navigate. But through it all, the love that had brought Yates and Bonnie together only deepened, providing a solid foundation for their children and a beacon of hope for those who knew them. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Bonnie with a special gift, a small, bound book in which he had recorded, in his careful handwriting, the story of how a desperate rancher had offered shelter to a stranded woman, and how she had given his children a mother and his heart a home. "So our children and grandchildren will know," he explained as Bonnie turned the pages with tear-filled eyes, "that sometimes the greatest journeys are the ones that lead us to where we're meant to be all along." "And where is that?" Bonnie asked, though she already knew the answer. Yates pulled her into his arms, his face reflecting all the love of their years together and the promise of many more to come. "Home," he said simply. "Wherever we are together,